So one bit of advice that I would give you, practical tip, is to slow down. Slow down. There are lots of reasons why a learner would want to rush. You know, it's very common for learners to feel like they don't want to inconvenience anybody around them, and so if they can get out of everyone's way, that'd be really good. So that's one tendency. And then another one is you've got somebody behind you. Again, you want to get out of their way. You don't want to make them be any slower than they want to go, so therefore you feel compelled to rush. Another one is this idea that you have to somehow keep up with the pace of traffic that's around you, and no, not at all, not at all. It's better to do things well and slower rather than trying to keep up, doing things quickly and not very well. So if I had one overriding piece of advice for you, it would be slow down, pay attention to the speedo, don't drive to the maximum speed limit all the time. And some people, they even fall into the trap of driving at, say, 33 and a 30, 43 and a 40, etc. But really don't feel that, take that pressure off you. You don't need that pressure when you're learning to drive. Take it off of you and don't feel compelled to rush. A lot of people, they sort of feel that you've just got to do what you're doing at the pace that everybody else drives around at. And if you were skiing, you wouldn't do that. You really wouldn't. If you were learning to ski, you wouldn't attempt to ski at the pace that everybody else skis at, because you would fall a lot and you would hurt yourself a lot. And just because you're not hurting yourself in the car, it's not doing your confidence any good when you're making mistakes. So my advice is to slow down. If you're finding that you're making mistakes or even breaking the law and speeding, then stop doing it, really, because you're not doing yourself any favours, really. So I really do mean slow everything down, do it methodically, slower, better, and try not to put this pressure on you to do things quickly. It inevitably is counterproductive. It very rarely works as a strategy in a learning environment to do things faster. Just compare that to other things that you, when you're learning, you know, what other learning environment can you think of where it pays to try and do it quickly? Learning an instrument, learning a language, well, blimey, you know, anything you care to mention, it's very rarely a winning strategy, a successful strategy, and it's exactly the same in a car. I think the only difference in a car is that there are these factors which are influencing your behaviours as you're driving around, and I think sometimes that it's not even necessarily a conscious decision to be rushing. It's not a conscious decision sometimes, but if you can pay attention to your speedo and try and do things methodically and slower, it will generally help you. So don't feel a need to rush, folks. I mean, honestly, don't feel a need to rush. Do things well, develop these habits so that they really do become just a part of your driving, and that's going to involve, first of all, it's going to require you to actually think a bit about what you're doing before you do it. That's a necessary part to make it habit forming. You go mirrors, you go signal, you go position, speed out, speedo before the gears. So if you're approaching roundabouts, don't just fall into the very easy trap of thinking to yourself, oh, second gear, and then before you know it, you whack the clutch down, you're putting it into second gear, and you might be doing 40 miles an hour, far too fast for second gear. Don't get bogged down in gears. Be thinking about speed first of all. Mirror signal position, speed, look at the speedo, get that down first of all, then do the corresponding gear change for whatever speed you're driving at. And this is all relevant. This video is all about speed, getting the speed down to then enable you to give you the time to do the necessary actions, things like judging and anticipating and assessing. These are all very, very key mental skills that all drivers do regularly, often, very, very often, as they're driving around. But of course you can only do those things, you can only make effective observations if you're giving yourself the time to do that, and that inevitably means paying a bit of attention to the speedo and being prepared to put the brakes on. And if you're finding that it can be incredibly frustrating if your driving ability is not getting any better, and ultimately it's because you're driving too fast. And try and think to yourself, why am I doing this? This video could save you mega bucks in driving lessons, just if it prompts you to think to yourself, why am I insisting on driving faster than I can actually cope with, and being prepared. See, some people don't like to brake because they've got vehicles behind them that don't want to brake, and they're really worried about that. And don't get me wrong, you know, if people are tailgating, if they're very close behind you, you might want to brake sooner but a bit lighter. So don't get me wrong, that's a good consideration. But generally speaking, you know, look after yourself. Don't get obsessed with thinking about considering other people around you. Your needs are really important to you, and so get a bit, I suppose, get a bit selfish really with your particular needs. I suppose that's what we're saying really, is start thinking about what you're attempting to do rather than getting out of the way of people that are behind you. Difficult, isn't it? Difficult message really, but ultimately that is what we are saying here. Yeah, I can't tell you the amount of pupils I've had who, when this message I'm giving you in this video, when the penny drops, when that really does sink in, they have a step change in the improvement on their driving. I really can't tell you how often that happens. It is definitely a trend, a pattern, and that's why I'm bothering to give this message to you now, because the sooner you can switch on to this idea of just slowing down, the sooner your driving ability will definitely improve. And so there we are really. You know, you don't forget, you can learn from stuff like this. Although driving's all about practical, it's a practical skills, isn't it? But just sometimes the messages that you get in these videos, these tips, can be extremely beneficial to people, because often it affects the mindset of how they're going about doing things. And you know, don't underestimate it. Honestly, really, it's this is a big deal. Just slow down. Don't feel pressured, compelled to be driving at the maximum speed limit. slow down. I don't necessarily mean to say you've got to either be on the gas or on the brake, not in the slightest. Sometimes if you see something up ahead that you're not sure of and you see it early enough, just coming off the gas, checking central mirror, coming off the gas and giving yourself time for things to unfold naturally is all it takes. It doesn't have to be all the right foot doesn't have to be actively on the gas or the brake all the time. Far from it, you know. But it takes some courage and it takes a bit of time to really understand this message and understand the consequences of not following the advice. But you can reduce the amount of time that takes to realise it. You can reduce that time by raising your awareness on a video like this, and it will save you so much. Yeah, it seems like such a sort of a glib or such a sort of basic thing to say that, oh, you know, oh yeah, all driving instructors say that, but the point is really, if you're finding yourself doing 33 and a 30 constantly, then it really will be in your interest to try and understand why you are continuing to do that, because no amount of a driving instructor turning around to you and saying slow down, you're going over the speed limit, slow down. So honestly, it really doesn't have any effect on your behaviours, your driving behaviours at all. And so it really is in your interest for you to try and understand why it is that you are doing that. And like I say, you know, don't misinterpret the message here. I'm not saying everybody is necessarily consciously speeding or just driving too fast consciously, not in the slightest. There are many reasons why this happens, and sometimes it doesn't involve the pupil making a deliberate decision to drive faster than they can cope with. But so I hope this helps anyway. Observations at junctions has always been, since I've been doing this job, the #1 reason for people failing driving tests. Observations at junctions, you've got to give yourself time to assess whether it is safe to proceed, really, and you have to give yourself time. You're trying to learn a new skill, and in order to learn that new skill, you have to give yourself time to develop it and make the right decision. If you're finding yourself coming onto roundabouts when really you shouldn't have done because there's other road users there, and you're adversely affecting other road users, you're not giving yourself time to do the necessary observations to help you decide whether it is safe or correct even to go onto the roundabout. And no amount of a driving instructor you see, sometimes in order to try and sort this situation out, and I'm not making any judgments here, but sometimes driving instructors, they sort of fall into this trap of just telling pupils to approach in second gear, and so the consequence of that is that you get pupils approaching too fast, but then putting it into second gear, which the car doesn't like, and nor do the passengers, and nor does the vehicle behind, because it's the wrong speed. Sorry, it's the wrong gear. Second gear is the wrong gear for the given speed. Or the other situation that just crops up is that people, they just become robotic, and they just think to themselves that, oh right, well I've always been told that, you know, I have to approach all roundabouts in second gear, which again is not the case at all. There are plenty of circumstances and roundabouts where that would not be good advice at all. So yeah, do yourself a favour and slow down. And I really do mean do yourself a favour. You're not doing your driving instructor any favours necessarily by slowing down. You are doing yourself a favour. You will save yourself mega bucks, and you will get yourself your driving licence quicker if you just take on this advice of slowing down to do things better, in a better quality way. And because you can't mess about with safety, can you? There isn't any getting away from this, and people don't pass driving tests when they're not safe. Well, let's be honest, they shouldn't really even be going for driving tests if they're not safe, should they? Let's be honest. So the responsibility really rests on your shoulders, if you like, for getting this right, and that doesn't mean just, oh, my driving instructor tells me constantly to slow down, drives me insane. I'm only doing 25 in a 30 and he's saying slow down, slow down, slow down. Well, you just have to ask yourself, why is it? Just because you're in a 30 does not mean to say you've got to do 30. In just the same way that if you're in a 70 or a 60 or 70, it doesn't mean to say you've got to do 60 or 70. It's driving to the conditions is the skill here. Recognising what the conditions are and driving at a corresponding speed. It developed the skill of being able to identify when the driving conditions are getting better or worse. That's a skill, that is, and because then you know you don't get obsessed with maximum speed limit signs. You're more able to, you're more willing to drive at a speed that reflects the driving conditions. And like I say, you know, that is definitely a skill that needs a bit of work on to develop that. And then that's good then, because that's no longer are you. The amount of times people think that when you go from a 30 into national speed limit, then that means you then have to go from driving a car. That means you then have to go from 30 to 60. Wow, it really doesn't, does it? These speed signs are not, these maximum speed signs are not intended to be an instruction to do that speed. The skill of being a safe and competent driver is to be driving at an appropriate speed for the driving conditions, and that's more the point, rather than just paying attention to just driving at the maximum speed limit. So when you come to when a roundabout is coming up in front of you, well in the distance, start to assess the roundabout. Check do your observations of what's around you, behind you, and start assessing that roundabout, because you need to start thinking about speed early on. Look, let's get the brakes on, even with vehicles behind. Let's get the brakes on and do something with that, and then that gives you more time to start looking at these roundabouts. If you don't do that initial, did you see what I just did there? I did observations, and then I did braking, and did you see me glance down at the speedo? And so I did observations, braking, I glanced down at the speedo, and then I did a gear change to reflect the speed I was at, and that then enabled me, that gave my eyes the chance to assess how it was going on the roundabout, and whether I needed to slow down more and perhaps do lower gear changes or not. But my point really is, in this video, is that unless you get that speed down with the brakes, your brain can't make that decision, because your eyes aren't given a chance to do it, really. So massive point, really massive point this is, and don't underestimate it, whatever you do. So there we go, that's that video. I just want to give you a practical tip and just encourage you to slow down and do things well, and you will see a step change, a marked improvement in your driving. Honestly, you will, which has got to be a good thing, isn't it? So give it a go, put this into practice, give it a go, and I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. Okay.